La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Welcome, everybody, to La Lanterna Podcast, episode 19. Welcome, Matt.
Fabry, good to see you. How's it going?
I'm like so happy for this weekend. I think every Genoano is finally happened, so that Mogugno finally is gone.
It may not be forever, but I'm happy too. I share that feeling for sure.
Well, so what happens is match day 7, and we have Genoa victorious away, so 3 straight wins away. Actually, if I may say, if I have read it correctly, it seems like we haven't seen a start like that since the 50s.
Wow, really? With 3 straight away wins? It's been since the 50s? Oh, man.
So the starting of a championship and having 3 wins outside is I guess the Genoa from the 50s, and that's what we're seeing right now. And I guess I think we're going to go dive deep into the match itself, but I would for sure say, as we just mentioned, the fact that it brought perhaps among all the fanship like a little bit of happiness, and or mostly I would say being a little bit more understanding that there is something that is happening. What do you think?
I totally came away with that feeling. I mean, I felt like with this game, there were definitely some changes in the lineup and some changes in the formation, I guess, at least from what we had seen recently. And we'll talk about that. But I was excited because you definitely saw identity in the way we were playing, which was exciting. And it didn't really matter as much the players that we had on, which for me was even more exciting. So, and to have it all end in a pretty convincing win, I think you have to say, against SPAL was it was a good result.
Well, it was a tough game because first of all, it was an away game.
Yep.
SPAL not necessarily being at the top of the flight, but still it has had several good results.
Right.
But as we also mentioned last week, it was not necessarily a given. Even though, once again, we had an amazing game. I think we started strong immediately. And finally, our man has scored on an action, right?
Yes, Massimo Coda. So
Coda finally gets in the books, not only a penalty, but actually a real, what they want to call a real goal, I guess. And that was on the 19th minute. Why don't you give us a little bit more of a highlight of what did you see from the actual spectacle or commentary around it?
So if I remember the play well, I think there was a phase in this game where we were really whipping balls in from the left side, and I think Payet had a delivery in to the box. There was a little bit of a deflection, and I can't remember if there was
not Payet, right? You're talking about Sabelli.
Am I Sabelli would have been on the right hand side. I can't remember if
That's right. I'm sorry. Yes, because Sabelli. My bad. Scratch that totally. We had Sabelli in lieu of Hefty, right?
Yes. So and I'm pretty sure I remember this happening this way. I know there was also like a really good combination play with Aramu and Coda, but I think that was a separate kind of instance that had happened, and of course we saw a later goal in the match. But the ball comes in. Ultimately, it falls back a little bit kindly to Coda, who's sitting kind of on the right side, a little bit open, and he's got kind of the goal begging for him a little bit. But this is also one of those chances that sometimes you see strikers out of form, they don't convert them. And he was as cool as you like. It was actually a little bit difficult because the ball was in the air, kind of landed, but he did take it down. And then he really just a wonderful finish across the face of the goal in the bottom. I guess it must have been the bottom left-hand corner of it. So A fantastic goal poacher's goal, I guess you could say, or a real kind of striker's finish. And it starts with 1-0 to Genoa.
And actually, let me add something to that. Absolutely, everything was perfect to the description itself. But I wanted to also convey to the fact that a lot of fans were a little bit worried about Blessing, about how he was putting Coda on the pitch. And there was a very nice interview in Italian, of course, on DAZN Italy. And Massimo Coda was interviewed. And he actually says that's the exact type of game and play that he is used to and he really likes to and enjoys to play. So what I'm trying to say with this is he also won the 2 championships for scorer player, like Capocannoniere.
Yes, top scorer. Yes.
In the same type of role. So people just shouldn't worry too much and think that it's Blessing that is putting Coda in the wrong position, because he's not.
Yeah, I think it was nice to hear him say that too. And I we had kind of like a funny chat on the group chat when the lineups were announced too, because everyone was kind of semi-scratching their heads trying to figure out where all the players were lining up. And some think the Genoa app thought for some reason we were going to be in a 4-4-2, I guess out of habit, for the 4-2-2-2 that we've been lining up in the past several games. But this one, at least in definition, I think was our good old-fashioned 4-2-3-1. So
let me stop you right there, actually.
Yeah.
When you saw the lineup, the starting 11, so it didn't tell us, obviously. Usually, when you see the starting 11, you can guess what's the module. Exactly. But usually it does not come out with the module. I mean, it never does, actually. But when you saw that lineup, what was your gut feeling, Tony? Were you surprised? Were you pleased? What was the emotion at that point?
I mean, I think both of the last 2 things that you said a little bit. I mean, honestly, like I kind of have been hoping that Yalchin would give a little bit more of a chance and more running time at the beginning of the match. And so I was happy to see him starting. Seeing Aramu from the get-go was exciting. And of course, Strootman being in there also from the jump, which we've really only seen limited performance from him. I mean, there were a huge amount of changes in there. The defensive side, I think you maybe could have worried about slightly because, as you mentioned, Hefty was not in the starting 11. He's kind of been a stalwart for us going back to last season. Also, Bonnie, similar guy, similar thing. We have Ilsanker in there. He's done well in limited minutes, but starting a match away from home. And then you have Volyako in, I guess, in a position where Dragoshin normally would be playing. And so got 3 changes in the back. You got Strootman coming in for Badel in the midfield. And then Aramu and Yalchin. So I didn't know exactly what to think, to be honest, but I think, honestly, the potential, like for me, what it signaled was with Aramu in, with Strootman in, and again, kind of excited to see Yalchin, but really with those 2 players, I think we had been hearing and understanding more or less that they're not playing a whole lot because they need to get used to the system. They need to get used to Blessing's style of play. And so it's kind of like, wait a minute, are they now ready to go? Like, is this now what our starting 11 is going to look like? So I thought it was kind of exciting.
That's actually a good point that you bring up, Matt. I was surprised, definitely. I was like a little bit scratching my head, but not in a negative way. I was more like, what's happening?
Yeah.
I was curiously happy, per se. And to your point, I'm just going to add the fact of Aramu, which I'm super happy to have seen him from the first minute. Contrary to a lot of people that were thinking, well, he was with Venezia until the last minute, so he was ready and so on. We could see very well that after 30, 40 minutes max, he was just not able to be at the same pace as it was from the first half for the first half an hour, anyways.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I applaud Blessing. I think actually I'm going to kind of like go back to what my decision was for the VIP player, and I think we should introduce the VIP. I think we did mention it a few times, but we should add this VIP for each match. At first, and we're going to say it after, but at first I had a player in mind, but I would think that Blessing, if not equally, I think he may have even surpassed my best, the VIP, which I have a funny feeling to be both the same for both of us. But
yes,
But anyways, so I think Blessin did wonders with this lineup. I think he's showing us what he has in mind for the future, for the season. And obviously not all players are ready, even though he did keep him in. And it's showing us that some have the minutes in their legs and some don't. But nevertheless, that's why we saw the first half, even though it was not necessarily with a lot of goals, we saw super Genoa. And at the end, I don't think, I don't think, that's statistics. I didn't even see the goal.
No, I think you're right. I'm not sure there were any like real massive shots on target. I can't remember. I'm looking also at the statistics, but they had
shots on target right now. I see one shot, 5. So,
but still, I mean, it was a very dominant performance. It was unlike, I think, many of the games we've been watching in Serie B, where we have our moments of dominance, which usually lasts for a decent amount of time, but then you see the opposite happen where at least it's even, if not, maybe the momentum's going the other way. So I think you're completely right. Like, look, it was a challenging match. I'm not saying we walked all over them, but it did seem like we were imposing ourselves more on this game. And one thing I think, so I love your take on Blessin and him being almost like the most valuable, because there were some question marks, I think, that we all kind of had with some of the signings that we had. And I'm, again, singling out Strootman and Ramu a little bit here. But, like, we've seen kind of how Blessin wants to play. And I still remember that play, I think it was against Juventus last season, where Goodmanson's tracking all the way back and he blocks this shot. And you think, like, how on earth is he convincing a winger to be running that hard and putting in that much effort on the defensive side of the ball? And we bring in a guy like Aramu, who's kind of, thought of as this more mercurial, maybe like more classic kind of a number 10, where he's really, he's the playmaker. He's really skillful on the ball, but he's maybe not, the engine running around and breaking up plays. And Strootman is obviously different. He is that engine type player, but he's also a player at a different part of his age, and maybe isn't a player that's going to be, running around like the Tasmanian devil all over the pitch. And I think what was two of the most exciting things in the whole match for me was, one, there were several plays actually where Ramu was really putting pressure on SPAL. And there's one, I think he ran at the goalkeeper. He almost got something. There were several others where he was just chasing things down, and you could just totally see that he was bought in. And there was another possession. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was in the first half, where SPAL were kind of advancing the ball. They were working. They were trying to find their pockets. We started applying pressure. I think at one point, Strootman, who was kind of more close to almost, our defensive third, ended up chasing the ball all the way out past the halfway line, and SPAL ended up passing it back. And I think they ended up passing it back to their goalkeeper. So they went from basically being in our final third to working the ball all the way back, because they couldn't find that route and they were getting that pressure. And maybe this excites me because as being a player, when I do play soccer, I'm not the most skillful guy. I'm usually on the defense in some way. I love seeing that team cohesion, and it was totally there in this match. And I think it's a big reason why you just said they only really had one shot on target in the whole game.
That's right. No, and to that point, I wanted to point out what you just said also earlier before, that surprise about the center backs. And yes. I think that Blessin, having put the two that were, like, let's call them the benchers for whatever the reason where it was, to show that and to demonstrate to everyone and himself too, that there is that good interchangeability without having to be too preoccupied in the event someone is missing that match. So yes. Whether we are missing out on Bani or missing out on Dragostin or Volyak or Ilsanker, we know that we have these four that are inter-rotating, like center back a little bit on the right versus the left and whatnot.
Yeah, well.
But personally, I think that even though he did change both of them towards the end, if I'm not mistaken, but
yep.
I still think that we had a solid defense in the back. Obviously, we are all used to, and a human being doesn't like change, right? So we're so used to the Bani and Dragostin. We're like, no, okay, now I don't want Voljako and Ilsanker as a center backs. I want the ones that I'm used to, right?
Right.
But I didn't miss them, even though I do miss them because I really like them. But I didn't miss them per se, if that makes sense what I mean.
That totally does. And I mean, I think also your Freudian slip a little bit with Sabelli and Hefty is worth talking about too, because like, I mean, Hefty, honestly, I think has kind of struggled a little bit for his standards anyway in Serie B so far this season. But I didn't really feel like we were missing his play for most of the match, which was a surprise, just given how dynamic he can be on both sides, going both defensively and then going forward. So,
no, you're right. Absolutely, he did replace Hefty like with a per se. What I've written on some chats were essentially that having Sabelli on the bench is a luxury for us because he's essentially a starting 11 for many other teams in Serie B. Serie B, mind you, right? We've had him before,
right.
And in Serie A, maybe he's not that right quality and whatnot, but nevertheless, he just, in a way, he surprised me, but at the same time, I was pleased about his performance. Now, when we talk about the midfield,
yes.
Now Frendrup, there's nothing really to add on top of his excellence. That's what I was like.
As always, pretty much.
Yeah, essentially, he's like our moving MVP all the time. Like
right.
if he's not the best, he's the second best of the match. But I have to say the difference quality between Strootman and Badal has definitely shown. Maybe because Badal is a little bit on different type of players too, right? So Badal is more on the defensive and likes to slow down the game because that's just his style. While Strootman is a little bit more on the offense type of thing. Not a super offense type of midfielder, but a little bit definitely more than compared to Badal. And we saw that throughout the match, the ownership. And I'm going to look at you right now when you said, "Oh, they're bringing up these oldies." I can't remember.
I know. I have to eat my words on this one for sure.
Now, mind you, let's hope that he doesn't, and I'm still talking about Kevin Strootman, that he doesn't get injured and whatever minutes and games that we can get out of him. If we have him for even half of the season with this quality, oh my God, this is Serie A quality, guys.
I have to completely agree. And I do have to eat my words from a couple of weeks ago where I was kind of like, guys, temper your expectations. We hired a bunch of oldies and Massimo Coda, who also isn't all that young, to be fair. But he looked 100% the part in this game. He was, like you mentioned, he had kind of like, he's always been that defensive guy. He's also like a huge like player, I think, relatively speaking, in Serie B. So you see this guy, he's kind of this imposing figure in the middle of the park. But I mean, there were all those like little, not so subtle, really, like moves forward where he'd have like a nice little dink and play the ball in, or he'd just kind of connect, or just a really good pass kind of leading up the line or something along those lines. And it felt like we had like a real cohesion with the team. And I do think, so when we were describing the goal, I want to talk a little bit about some of the interplay, because I think what I had maybe semi-confused it with for a second was actually an early chance that Yalchin had, which he did miss, where Aramu, really nice link up with Coda, who really quickly links it back to Yalchin, and it was a great, just really fluid movement. And those types of things, even though it's maybe a small little triangle or however you want to say it, we haven't always seen that stuff from Genoa. And I think part of the exciting thing about a match like this is that you start to kind of get the vision a little bit more. Like, we have these players that can work this way. Portanova didn't play at all. And he obviously would have been useful, but like the fact that we had these guys that could contribute, and that we're already seeing a little bit of chemistry between some of their playing styles, I think is a really encouraging thing.
No, it's interesting that you say about Portanova. I think it was okay not to include him.
I agree.
Let's remember that we have a huge bench, right? So you're always going to have a player say, "Oh, I wonder why didn't Blessing didn't make him play," right?
Right.
But he decided after 60 minutes to replace Yalchin with Jagiello, which we've seen good things about him in the last couple of games.
Yep.
And that sad moment of that injury, which good thing right now, as we're recording, rumors have it that he is okay and he will be available for the match against Cagliari. But that bad injury just maybe, it was like, oh my God, what happened? I was afraid for the worst. Let's put it that way. Anyways, and so he came in on the 60th, Jagiello or Jagiello, whatever. Remember, I don't know how you're supposed to call him.
Yeah.
And about 20 minutes after, so around the 78th minute, there's this injury. And what does Blesson do? So he doesn't bring in Portanova to say, I'm going to hold off onto the result. We're only 1-0. And puts in Puskás.
I thought the Puskás thing was completely interesting. I did not expect that at all. I mean, I love to see it, honestly. Like there was an aggressive substitution. You're right. I mean, Portanova, of course, he has attacking qualities. There's no question about that. I don't need to say he's a defensive player by any stretch of the imagination. But Puskás is a guy who's thought of as a striker, And so, he's coming in that way. And I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you if they had changed their formation slightly or
they
not.
They had to. I think it got back to the 4-2-2-2.
Yeah. But it was kind of a ballsy substitution. I mean, look, we were already a man up at that point. And I don't know how you feel. I mean, I kind of read into it because obviously Jagiello was on the receiving end of that tackle that ended up sending SPAL down to 10 men. I kind of assumed that was like a contributing factor to him being injured, because it was, for anybody that didn't catch the match, it was kind of one of those plays where like the player was late with the challenge and he just held his studs up the entire time and really got Jagiello like very obviously studs up, kind of nailed on red card when you see that. I don't think they initially awarded it, but you can't not award it when you look at it. And it's not one of those like, freeze frame moments where now it looks like a handball or something. Like it was obvious red card.
No, listen, I was disgusted for the yellow. I'm glad because of VAR.
Yeah.
And it was clear to me, obviously, heat of the moment and so on. I could have seen it like more exaggerated than what it was. But once we saw it again in the replay, it's like, that was like, you cannot point that leg of a defender that way. That's just like, it's just,
I mean, it was so unnatural too. He like held it up. It was like he was doing some sort of like ab workout or something. It was very strange. It was very intentional. It seemed like you don't do that if you're not trying to kind of make some contact. I don't think.
Exactly. So the red was absolutely correct. What about that? At the end of the first half, we got a couple of a little bit. The one about Martinez, first of all.
Yes.
So this ball that he had, he came out of the box, and he got a yellow. A lot of people were claiming that he could have got a red, but by the regulations, if you read everything, it all was correct to be a yellow because of different factors. There was Boyako there. There was the forward, I think, was the back was anyways, certain specifics around it that was legit to be a yellow, not a red. But what do you think about that exit from the box from Martinez?
The whole thing was, again, like I know this is one where fans are going to look at it and be like, well, I don't know about Martinez. Like, was this something? And there was already some comments about it at halftime and everything. I mean, it's tricky as a goalkeeper because he kind of tried to make a judgment call. I thought that it was actually, you actually might know this better than me. I thought that the yellow was more so because of the collision than because of him handling the ball or anything. Because I think if he would have handled it outside of the box, it would have been a red card, right? But I don't know the rules, to be honest with you. But so the ball was coming in. He kind of made a little bit of a bad decision on when to go for the ball. And at the same time that he was going up for it, you had SPAL's player kind of jumping in at the same time. And so they made this collision. It looked like they could have been, are they going to award it? I think you're right. It was outside the box. They couldn't have been a penalty, but are they going to give him a red? What's going to happen here? Like what's going to go on?
Well, it would have been a red if it was a direct contact with the forward towards the goalie, but I think the forward was giving his back, and the yellow was mainly because he touched it with his hands outside the box.
Yeah. Okay.
More or less at a high level, that was the gist of the regulation.
Yeah, I mean there was definitely the collision made it harder, I think, for him to make, and you could see Martinez's case is like, as a keeper, obviously, like you have to be able to go for the ball and not be taken out, and so the contact had happened there, and he was kind of pleading to the opposite to say, like, why is this guy diving into me while I'm trying to make a play? I think it was a relatively clean play in the end of the day. I would have liked to have seen him do something different. I thought he was trying to head the ball out actually for a second, but he maybe realized that he couldn't, or he misjudged it or something else. But,
no, I think that's exactly it, Matt. I think he essentially had a misjudgment at that time. You know, sometimes when you're just in that specific moment with the rush and the happening and so on, your team is one up and whatnot. You're saying, oh shit, what's going to happen here? I better, as he said, he was probably already out. Maybe the ball was something like that, and he just made that call. Personally, I applaud him with his courage and what he did.
Well, that's the thing, is like, when you see those things, I know a lot of people are saying, oh my God, this could have cost us. We could have been down a man. We could have had all these other things happen. We could have given up a really good free kick. Like, a bunch of things could have happened here. Well, I guess we did give a free kick because of the foul. But as a keeper, I love seeing aggression. I mean, you can't be, completely ignorant in your aggression, but him doing that versus him sitting back, and let's say that ball gets played in and he's just sitting in the goal, like, he's in a one-on-one situation, that probably is a goal, like, unless he makes a fantastic save.
It could have very well happened, right?
So to be more aggressive in stopping the problem and running out there and having that rush of blood to decide, I am going for this, so long as there's communication, and I don't think there was like a communication problem with him, and I can't remember who it was. I don't think it was Ilsanker. I think it was Volyako, but I can't recall honestly who the defender was. So like, I agree with you. For me, it was oh shit, that could have been bad, but I wasn't personally like, oh my God, Martinez is just out of his blocker again. I thought it was actually a relatively reasonable decision for him. He just maybe mistimed it.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything else really to add to that. Just like, it was just like some coincidence of things that happened, and I think he did the right call, and ultimately it could have gone different, but it could have also gone worse, right?
Totally.
And then what else can we say? So let's talk briefly about, I guess, the second goal. So Mr. Massimo Coda not only is the author of the first goal, not only for himself on an action compared to a penalty, but also assist man.
There we go. Another assist. Yeah, this one was another, though. This was a good blessing goal in a way. I mean, there wasn't like a massive team press or anything, but Coda does a great job of picking sort of the defender's pocket, and the ball kind of falls for Goodmanson to convert the goal, and this really puts the game away. So at this point, there's already a difference in Genoa being up 11 to 10 men, but it's still one of those things that you like to see. The aggression had not waned. The fact that the opponent was down a man was not something that I think was taken lightly. We saw some, I think, decent opportunities from some other players. I think Puskás had a decent chance, if I'm not mistaken, either.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that was it. When that goal goes in, we've secured the 3 points. We've locked in this game.
Yes, and absolutely, and I think that made a lot, as I mentioned right at the beginning, made this the not only Blessing's type of style of game to show that there is some sort of game happening on, because a lot of fans were claiming the fact that there is no game and whatnot. There is game. You might not like it, but it's there. And we're still considered to be the strongest opponent probably in City B. And that's the important part too. What can we say about the rest of the table? First of all, so where are we at right now?
So we're sitting at fourth place at the moment, and to your point, we've won 2 matches on the spin now, having of course beaten Modena on the match before this last one, which feels like forever ago with the break. But I think obviously important to remember the point differential between all the teams. We're sitting on 14 points out of 7 matches. First place, Regina right now, jointly with Bari and also Brescia, although there's a little bit of a goal difference thing going on, all sitting on 15 points. So we're a point behind the front of the pack.
Exactly. And then the surprise Ternana, just 1 point right behind us. And then you get the other surprise again, 1 point even further down to 12 with Frosinone.
Yep.
And then at par with Parma. And the surprise, super happy about them as well, at 11 with Cosenza. And we're talking about just the top 8 just because of the playoff type of position. And then you get Cagliari, which is our next opponent, at 10 with Südtirol.
I know. What a story. It's still such a cool thing to see Südtirol.
It is. Like, how many of us had thought after, what was it now, 4 or 5 games, that was it. It's obvious that they came up. Too bad for them, but they're the match. They're like the punching ball of Serie B, and too bad for them. Look at them. It's just like unbelievable.
I mean, they're unbeaten. They've beaten Pisa, Como. They get the win. Cosenza, and then this most recent one against Palermo. So
exactly, and they're but they're ahead of the likes of Ascoli, of Venezia, Benevento, Cittadella, Palermo. Like, come on, guys! Like,
right?
Südtirol, if they keep it up, the average points that they're doing right now, it's almost like straight. They're
locking it. Yeah. They'll be. They're literally a point off the playoff spot right now, I think. So, I mean, at the bottom of the table, I know Pisa have been struggling. They did get, I think, actually their first win of the season this past weekend.
Yes, I was going to go through quickly just to wrap up the first half, but essentially, I was going to say, like, we have Benevento Ascoli, which was a tie. Probably no offense to any one of those, but probably the most boring out of all match day 7, but in a good way, not necessarily better. Perugia and Pisa. Pisa finally got their first win away with a nice 3-1. Bari Brescia. Oh my God, I'm not even started about that one. I would have never expected the lead of the league that were together with Regina, and they did a little bit of a slip there as well. But losing 6-2 to this newly promoted super surprise, the only team in Serie B that has not lost yet.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, remember too, of course, they played Palermo the first game of the season, and I don't know. I mean, it's of course Bari are a big name and everything, but I don't think anybody expected them coming up from Serie C to be second in the table and joint top on points right now. So
Exactly.
And it's a real testament also to their own kind of attacking force. They've scored 16 goals this season, which is the most in all of Serie B so far. So they're clearly kind of getting it done in that way.
Then another super surprise, Matt. No one would have ever bet on that one. At Cagliari, Venezia beats Cagliari 4-1.
Yeah, what a complete topsy-turvy performance this was for Cagliari. I mean, so this was one I'm excited. We're going to be our guests and us, I know, talked about this match a little bit and kind of what it could mean and everything going on there. But I think also to give a little bit more of a spotlight back to Venezia, who of course obviously were in the Serie A group with us last season. Maybe it's finally turning around for them a little bit. Maybe this is kind of the spark that they needed to start to see. To start challenging again. I mean, I guess for our sake, we kind of probably don't want to see too much of that. And to be fair, they are sitting on 8 points, so there's still a few points adrift of where we are. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Venezia fan, you've got to feel like, all right, is this something we can start to replicate? I mean, you look also at their lineup, though. I mean, they've got Cheryshev, who has had maybe his days have gone by, but this guy used to be a baller, And, there's guys like, I still think Poyan Paulo, who I think had come from Leverkusen in the Bundesliga, one of the goal scorers in the match. There's some good players in the squad. So you got to be careful with Venezia. And I think they're probably going to start figuring it out sooner or later. Obviously.
So you're right. And I'm going to do a quick shout out to Marco Rinaldi, our guest from a few episodes ago, from the Rigore pod. And I just listened to his episode and he's just like ecstatic about his win.
I love it.
Venezia, yeah.
He should be.
He should be, exactly. Cittadella Ternana lost at home against the surprise Ternana. Ternana by Fabio Grosso, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm mistaken. I can't remember that. I think it was Fabio Grosso as a coach. Anyways, Cittadella is finding themselves a little bit in the iffy spot right now from former always close to at least in the top, the playoffs type of spots. Yep. Now they feel the heavyweight on being closer to the playouts. But again, it's still early, and I think that's still a very fresh and exciting type of team. The Modena that we just saw them not too long ago won, and thankfully for them, won against Regina.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is the thing. I mean, look, guys, we're in a real football league here. Like anybody can beat anybody. This is actual competition that we're seeing. And as much as, I kind of miss some of the glamour and the opportunity of being in Serie A, maybe going on to Europe in our brightest, dreamiest days and things of that nature. But this is a perfect underline of Serie B and how it's going to be difficult. Modena is a team, I think we didn't exactly brush them aside. We won 1-0 at home against them. But at the same time, like, you wouldn't be putting any money on them, I don't think, winning even in a 1-0 match against Regina. So seeing that performance there, I'm sure they're happy to be at least a point up and out of the relegation places right now with 6 points so far out of 7 matches.
Absolutely. And then after that, we have Palermo losing at home against, again, Sud Tirol.
On fire.
I'll never be tired about saying how, I don't know, I call that the Cinderella story. It's just really, as it was Cittadella a few years back, now it's Sud Tirol. And I really hope they stay in Serie B.
It's just fun. I mean, obviously it's a little beautiful location too and everything else, but it's just fun to see those small town teams kick above their weight a little bit.
And I hope we will find, it's hard to find an English-speaking guest from Sud Tirol fan and whatnot, but there's a lot of history meaning like a lot has happened, a kind of like different teams that merged together and so on. So essentially the official headquarters is in Bolzano, but the original, where it came from was a little bit more north from there, which is the Sud Tirol region. Mm-hmm. And they are predominantly known to be a little bit more Austrians rather than Italians. Yes. But the reason why I'm saying this is the curious thing is the starting 11, they're all Italians.
There you go.
That's like amazing, the fact of how promoting Italian players and so on.
Well, to your point, there are very few, even in Serie B. Is there another team that has an all-Italian starting 11 right now?
There's not. I mean, I'm all for having foreigners and so on because it makes everything more interesting and so on. Will it hurt in the long run? There's like so many conversations that can be made about this on the national team. Absolutely, yes. I think that the leagues, all three actually, so the top all the way down to the third division, so Lega Pro, Serie C, or former Lega Serie C, should do a little bit more, something about promoting youth. I don't know, something about it. But no, applause to Sud Tirol. Parma Frosinone. No, sorry, it was Frosinone that has a Fabry Grosso. So Frosinone being the a little bit of a surprise for the league so far, has lost against Parma. But mind you, Parma also, if I'm not mistaken, has also won thanks to 2 penalties. So, I mean, You know what I mean? I don't know. Then last one, which was the first actually match. I should have done it the opposite, but the first match of match day 7 was the win of our Lupi from Cosenza against the struggling Como. How do you take that one?
Well, obviously we're happy for our Rosso Blue brothers at Cosenza, and we'll be seeing them not too far from now when we play each other, and I think hopefully it should be an enjoyable match for both of us. But I kind of want to put the spotlight on the Como a little bit here, because I know they were somewhat this dark horse. You know, they've got Dennis Wise is like in the ownership. They brought in Fabregas. Like, oh, Como, what are they going to do? I think they were mid-table last season, so it wasn't like they were a super threatening side per se, but clearly they've been in Serie B for some time. I think a few years now since being promoted up, and sitting bottom at the table with 3 points in 7 matches, 3 draws, no wins, 4 losses, and a pretty bad, and I think maybe the worst goal differential of any team in the league. They've allowed 7 more goals than they've actually scored. So I don't know. It's kind of a shocker for me. I thought that they would be more competitive, but who knows? Maybe Como will wake up in, a month or two, and we see them all of a sudden in the lower mid-table.
So I guess this is a wrap for the first half of our episode. We're going to just quickly go to our commercial break, our famous, infamous commercial break. And right after this, we're going to have a super special guest with David Ferrini from Lega Football Podcast. Unbelievable VIP presence once again to our podcast.
So psyched about having David on, and you guys be sure to check out Lega Football. It's an amazing pod.
See you right after the break.
My name is Fabrizio Cardone, and I approve this message.
Welcome back from the break, and we're here with our special guest all the way from UK. We have David Ferrini. Hey, David, how are you?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
It's a luxury for us to have you as a guest over here at our little antenna. Very young on the side, but look always up to your style and to your fame, I guess. Like, we can only learn from you. Why am I saying this? And I'll let David more speak to it, but he is hosting an amazing podcast. And let me just give it back to you, David, and just tell us a little bit about who you are and all this fantastic things that you're doing, which is not only podcast, of course.
Well, thank you for the delightful intro. Thank you, Fabrizio. So Lega Football Podcast is the name of the pod that I'm hosting. So what we do is I try and get a few of the other Serie A commentators and Serie B commentators involved whenever they have spare time. So on the one that we've just published, we have David Windsor, who covered the Napoli-Torino game, come in and give us some feedback on what he thinks. I also get fans involved and other podcasters involved, like yourselves. You've been involved a couple of weeks back. And, it's good times for Genoa at the moment. They're off a couple of wins now, so I will get you back on, hopefully, for next week. So the listeners, look out for that one on the Lega Football Podcast. But it's a pleasure to be on yours as well. I know that there's lots of Genoa support around the world, including where you guys are from in Canada, Toronto, and also New York.
Yep.
There's, like the little Siamese, twin on the shoulder there, and so it's a podcast that is young, the Lega Football Podcast, but it's aimed to deliver just gives the listener some information about what's happened on the weekend, some insight into some interesting articles, something different from some of the other pods out there. There are other more established podcasts, but they focus on specifics, and they usually focus on the top 3. I'm one of those commentators that loves the bottom 17, in fact, like the bottom 13 clubs, especially because no one's focusing on them, your Genoas and your Torinos and Bologna and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as I can, I try and put some of that into the Lega pod and try and have guests on that are going to deliver something interesting to that niche market, including Serie B, Serie C listeners. So we just delivered a third division review of the first 5 match days as well for the people who are interested in Serie C. Hopefully Genoa doesn't end up there. So
don't say that.
We're keeping our fingers crossed, and absolutely, we always thrive in listening to your podcast. And it's like super duper. Like for me, I'm like in awe every time I listen to it. I'm like, I wish even we were like close to half of what the quality is.
It's such a fun pod.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think the fun element, obviously, like thinking a little bit more about Italian football as a whole. I remember there was one episode I think you guys did on Chievo's fall from grace or continual fall. That was a real deep dive into the issue. And those things are just like, hearing you talk before we started, David, on how you kind of became a fan and came into it and really liking sort of the more full picture, maybe we could say, of Italian football. I could relate a lot to that too. I think my story, shared a few times, started with wearing a discounted kit at a pickup match and everyone giving me shit because they're all Inter fans or Milan fans or Juve fans or something else. And it's like, you know what? All right, I'm a Genoa fan then. So, it's kind of fun to dive into that passion that exists, because football isn't just about those three teams. There are people that care about it all across Italy and all across the world.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of fans out there. Like 95% of the fans follow those three teams. Half of them follow one of them in particular in the black and white, and they just think the other 17 are there as the whipping boys that are supposed to just donate 3 points every week to them. So they're stunned when someone like Salernitana comes by and gets a 2-2 draw, or even a team like Ajax that have won the Champions League 4 times. When someone like a Napoli comes by and whips them 6-1 at home, it's the end of the world for a lot of people. It's banging foreheads into the wall and blood pouring, that kind of stuff. So I love those moments. The other week when there was, I think we called the podcast like epic loss, epic historical weekend for the big three, because they all lost on the same day within hours. And it was never happens in Serie A. It was something that we have to hold on to while we can, just for those few hours, because they finally all lost. And it's not that I hate them. It's just that I get bored very easily, and I don't like seeing the same teams win all the time. That dynasty of 9 years of Juventus was, it was painful for most fans. It was great if you're a Juve fan, but it's painful for everyone else.
No, and I think I've said that throughout in different times, and obviously depending on who's the listener might think or agree or not. But essentially in those 9 years, I fully agree with what you just said, and it made Serie A look a little bit boring from the outside, and
it looked like Scotland.
Exactly. Sometimes I refer to like it sounded like the Farmers League, but I don't want to go that far, but almost, right? Like if I look at Bundesliga, when you always see like out of 10 times it's Bayern that wins it, I'm like, am I that interested? Even though it is an interesting league, mind you.
Yeah.
Liga N, do I even care about watching it? I'm sorry, but not really. And that's because you always see PSG.
The script is written, you know what I mean? And it's unfortunate that investors come in and they have so much money that they can dominate so easily. And at least there's been some redemption in Italy. Unfortunately, it's the 2 Milanese clubs that are coming up with the goods. The positive over the past decade is the fact that Napoli, aside from Juventus, have won the most games over that 10-year span. So if you actually look at the points, Juventus is on like 900 points over 10 years. Then Napoli's like 780. The next is, I can't remember, it might have been Roma. And then Inter, but they were well down by like 80, 70 points, something like that under Napoli. So there is some competition from the smaller clubs. But when I say smaller clubs, we're talking about guys that come in and they're still investing hundreds of millions of euros,
right?
But it's just into Napoli or Roma, or it's a conglomerate or a hedge fund, someone like that's still coming in. You're never going to see a Salernitana with, I think Iervolino spent 10 million euros to acquire Salernitana in January from Lotito at auction. 10 million. I mean, you think about Nottingham Forest in the Premier League, what they spent on players this season.
Oh my God.
In pounds. It's embarrassing. I mean, I was telling a few friends of mine last night that the English Premier League is like this big guy on steroids who's got big pecs and huge arms. But then when you look underneath, and this I guess applies to Ligue 1 with PSG and Scotland with Celtic and Rangers, then underneath you see the big pecs, but underneath it's this flabby gut and small legs and a tiny cazzo, if you know what I mean. Nothing else there. There's nothing else except for those teams with all this money, and everything else is just a poor quality of players, or some of these players you would think they would struggle to make Genoa's team in Serie B, and they're getting paid 10 times the normal amount of a Serie B player playing in the championship. And it's part of living in the UK. You see a lot of great football, but you see a lot of overrated football as well. And it's inevitable in a market, probably the richest footballing market on the planet.
No, you actually bring up a good point. We've said that throughout. Also, the fact that Serie A just needs to pull up their sleeves and start to, I don't know, have a little bit of a better approach on also that marketing aspect. And obviously, it's. Even if you look at it from a perspective and I'm not trying to put it down, like the EPL type of thing on their performance, also from a European standpoint, it's not that they're overperforming compared to all the rest. I mean, mind you, yes, there are a lot more teams that are, more interesting. And that's what I think EPL makes it more interesting, because you see a lot more teams compared to just the one from majority of the other leagues. But I think it's also the burden, in my opinion, comes to La Lega, where they have to really, I don't know, just pull out the coglioni and do something a little bit better.
Yeah, look, I've had a word with a few people that are in mid-level or the higher places, but it's tough. And like you said, you don't want to put anyone down. They're dealing with what they're given. They have limitations as well. And we also have to remember, Italians in Italy, they don't like change. When my grandparents moved to Australia, they took the vinyl with Celentano and all these singers from the 50s and 60s, and they still play them 40 years later. Italians don't change easily. And I guess in a very dominant English-speaking world now, or Mandarin or Spanish, Italian speakers are, on such a low level that people in Italy haven't seen the necessity to adapt and drag themselves into the new world of calcio or new world of football or soccer, depending on where you are.
Of course.
We call it soccer in Australia as well, by the way. So
thank you. I appreciate that, David. We got somebody else on our side in that battle.
I know, exactly.
What do they call it? Is it soccer in Canada too?
I say soccer.
It is.
Right.
Even though, from a Canadian perspective, we're a little bit of a hybrid, a half American but also half British, because we use a lot of Britishism within the not only words and whatnot, but also spelling. But
you're a colony.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like us. Yeah. I'm back in the motherland now. So
even States was a colony, anyways. But
yeah, well, it was, but they had the coglioni to break away. But anyway, there's pros and cons to that. We'll have a political debate another time. But,
right.
But let's talk about Serie A2 and Genoa. Probably the biggest club in the division, I think, in terms of club size, and considering, maybe Parma's there as well with the investment. But I think the 777 group, which I might just add now, there's an Aussie element to the
it is
777 group.
I'm glad that you heard about it. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's called FC Melbourne.
You're wrong.
I'm wrong. Okay, I'm wrong. Okay.
It's called in Australia. It's like the franchises in Canada or America, or the USA, where we always give it a nickname.
Victory.
Melbourne Victory,
Melbourne
or
Victory.
Brisbane Roar. Or
my bad.
No problem. But because there is an FC Sydney FC exists. So
So it's not that one. So it's the Melbourne Victory. And yes, indeed, the 777 got another team, which is the Melbourne Victory, under their belt, under their portfolio of teams now. Yeah. So absolutely, that's an Aussie aspect around it. That was quite a surprise from my perspective.
There's a pathway here. It's for anyone that's good from Australia can go to Melbourne Victory and maybe get signed for the Genoa Primavera. Yeah. And anyone who's too old, maybe Milan Badel in 3 years' time, can go the other way. There's a retirement pension scheme there. Perhaps we'll see how Melbourne wants to assert itself with this new deal. And I think it involves an airline called Bonza that 777 group has either invented or, they created this or they've acquired it. And I think they're going to become a sponsor. It's just a little bit of brief reading, probably as much as you guys have done, Matt and Fabrizio. So
yeah.
It's new, but it's exciting. And the opposition club, Melbourne City, before I ramble on too much, I want to talk about Genoa, by the way. Guys, listeners, don't leave the podcast because we're not talking about Genoa right now. Melbourne City is under the Manchester City umbrella with Palermo.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, so maybe you can have like this maybe they can shape it up on the calendar that Melbourne Victory play Melbourne City the same weekend that Palermo play Genoa.
They should do that. Yeah, exactly. That would be nice.
There's a lot of cross-pollination going on there. I feel like we're either in the City model or the RB model or some weird Frankenstein version of the two. So
maybe it's a net new model, totally different approach. Or some sort of.
Yeah.
But no, going back to Genoa, then to David's point, it has been a long time. We talked about it throughout, but it's been a long time that we haven't seen the Serie B. It has definitely changed since the last time we went down there. So that was over 15 years ago, and essentially we're finding it. How can I say it? A little bit very more challenging to what was expected. You did hear about the fact that it's a tough league. Another one that it's super underrated, very little known around the world. Like you hear a lot more of the championship from England rather than the Serie B. And as you referred also several times in your podcast, calling it A2, and as we also referred as such, I strongly believe that it is A2, especially like this year when you have all these mammoths up there that are like, I don't know, all the other teams are like super scared for the fact that not even reaching the top 8 for the playoffs. So what I'm trying to get with this is like, it's a very interesting league. It's finally, in a way, even though I wouldn't want to stay here for that long, it's interesting to be the favorites now, to be the ones to be looked at, the one that you have to, we're not used to that. And we want to get used to it for the next year when we're going to say, yeah, but that's a different
story. I think
story.
a quick return is a good return. I don't know what you and Matt think, but it could end up being a situation where you get stuck in Serie B and you end up swirling around, because every time another club gets promoted and they build a team and then they come back to Serie B, that's another 5% of difficulty that it's going to be for Genoa to claw their way back up. I think even though they got rid of a lot of players, they turned over a lot of players, they've still kept quite a good list, and then they've added a few. I mean, Adamu, come on, what a signing.
Right.
The players like this, you've got a Turkish guy, Yalçın.
Yeah.
And guys like Frendrup in the pivot. You've got Strootman back, even though you might get 10 games out of him before he's injured for the rest of the season.
I know.
You've got that Austrian center back now, Ilsanker, that he's won a Europa League. These are the guys, and I guess that's the advantage of having Blessin in charge, because he's brought them in and he used to coach them in Germany. So, and on top of that, you got Pajac, Sabelli, Voljako's back. So players that were sent out on loan because they weren't quite the caliber of what someone in whoever was coaching, whether it was Shever or whoever, just didn't see them as Serie A players, but they've been around Serie B, floating around, and those three there played playoff football last season. So
I mean, that's the thing. I know Fabry and I always feel like we're hitting our heads against the wall with this, and we sometimes are complaining about our own fans a little bit and some of the things we're looking at with the matches. But like, there was a lot of angst, I think, going into this season among Genoa supporters about the signings we had made. Obviously, Ramu came a little bit after the season had started, although the rumors were there. But I think it was really sensible where they've decided to keep players. Also, Jagiello, hopefully he's okay with an injury prognosis. I'm not sure exactly the latest on that one, but players that were playing in Serie B last season, they had the time, they have the experience. Are they necessarily the right caliber for Serie A? No, but guess what? We're not in there right now, and we've got to really perform and be sensible also about how we're spending, because that was one of the things that got us in trouble in Serie A year after year after year, is our transfer policies were completely insane. So,
well, different presidency, I guess, and now you've got some fresh blood in there, and there is some hope in going down a division and then coming back. You kind of hit the reset button, and fans are no longer complacent. It's like, we expect to stay in Serie A, and Ronaldo, we should sign Ronaldo. Like all these world-class players that everyone wants, they're only going to a specific bunch of clubs. And then you've got a few different tiers of players, and they're only going to specific clubs. So having players like bringing in players like Ustigard was a great move. He's a great defender. He's a little bit erratic, can get the odd yellow or red card, but Genoa tried last season. I could see them slowly deflating over the past few seasons. And although there was some hope, even a couple of the commentators were like, Genoa, maybe this year, top half the table. And I'm like, this is the year they're going down. I felt like it was the year they were going down. I thought they were very lucky in 2021. And then for me, they had too many, we call them band-aids or plasters in England, where you've got so many cuts that, you can only patch up so many of them before you're going to bleed out. And that for me was the season. Destro had to fire. He had to get sort of 15 goals. And if there's Genoa fans out there, I can understand the frustration. I've always followed the bottom clubs, and following Napoli. I remember that season, the last time Genoa were in Serie B, that was an ardue, in fact, with Juve and Genoa and Napoli. What a season that was. So there's reason for hope after that. You can see what happened there. You had 13 or 14 good years. I mean, not great years, but you're going to find players, the little diamonds in the rough players, hopefully Yeboah or Ekuban or someone like that comes good. You need another Diego Milito, but we'll see. You had Piotek, let him go and try and turn over the money and reinvest, or maybe keep it under the mattress. I'm not sure what was happening there, but it's tough. But I think even the goalkeeper now, Martinez, he's not bad. He's a Barcelona under-19 player. He's played some time in the Segunda, La Liga Dos, whatever they call it. And, he looks okay. He's conceded 5 goals in 7 games, but I think, it's just the one loss. I think the confidence is there for Genoa. As an outsider looking in, I think they're going okay. They're in 4th spot at the moment. So
yeah, I mean, look, we've not had a perfect start to the season. Sure, we've not been beating teams 4-0 every single match. Okay, fine, but
not going to happen.
We went from exactly what you said last season of like watching the first match of the year against Inter getting creamed, and all of us collectively knowing, okay, we're for sure going down this year, to being in Serie B, and we've had some turnover. It's not going to be that easy, So,
yeah.
And also when you look at just talking about the Serie B table a little bit, I think to the point earlier about Adue and where everything is, we've seen, it seems like, I guess Regina has been up there for a little while in the top of the table, but we've kind of had a few other teams coming in those top spots, and we're still looking at like 5 points separating first from 10th right now, which includes, by the way, Südtirol is sitting in 10th place, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's an amazing.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful Cinderella story, by the way.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's like a little bit, if you look at it from a Serie A perspective, also like a Monza. So it's a great comeback, and I'll always look at Palladino I like the guy because I'll never forget what he did with us.
Yeah, very important player. Spent some time at Genoa, and yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
So, what does it look like right now? I think just to wrap quickly what you mentioned a little bit earlier, like obviously it did hurt the Genoani with respect to the fact of falling down to the 2nd division, especially with the new coming of the new ownership and whatnot. But as you said, the reset definitely was needed, and I think it was probably for our benefit for that to happen. So yes, absolutely. Since the get-go, management and owners have always said this is just a 1-year limbo type of thing. The approach is to be only 1 year. They use that slogan type of thing. Everybody was like touching all their amulets and stuff like that, but for not jinxing or whatnot. But I see, and I'm glad that you see it also from the outside. I see that the team is there. They're very cohesive. They're very tight together. And even though we're not on the top spot, which is just 1 point actually to that, I still think that it is still one of the, if not one of the strongest team in the league right now. And it's we're always seen as the ones to be beaten, and that's the tough part to play it well as well, right?
Yeah, it's completely new. It's the
anomaly is Bari. They haven't lost yet.
Crazy.
And they've got a couple of players. As soon as they signed for Laruncho, I knew that they were going to have that kind of midfielder that can drag the ball forward and draw in an extra defender and create space, or he can beat a defender and shoot a goal. And between him and Khedira, that is the difference. And I still believe that Genoa has that in them as well, where you've got Aramu and even the likes, Yeboah has only just scored his first goal, but even a guy like him, he's got so much talent. Ekuban, you can see they've got pace, they're diminutive, they've got the footballing brain of a more mature player. It's just that they're not being, fed the ball in the right, the right pass wasn't made, or someone, other teams have midfielders that get back and block, a passage of play. They'll choke that space behind the line. So if Yeboah or Ekuban were playing, if you substituted them with Moise Kean at Juventus, they would get those opportunities in front of goal to blow like Kean does. So, but I guarantee they probably put a few of them away. And now you've got George Puskás as well. He's a great player. Yeah. He's a great player. He was so important for Pisa. So you're getting these players like Korda, Puskás, and Aramu. That is a sign that they, it's a statement. That is a statement. We want to be back in Serie A, and Aramu was sensational for Venezia last season. So
absolutely.
And it was good.
Even Martinez, the goalkeeper, he played he's not a prolific player, but he's not a great player, but he's played Champions League football. He played a game last season. Yeah. So he's got these little bit of experience there. Someone from, the Austrian defender from Leipzig. You've got, I think Martinez is from there as well. Yeah. And then you've got some of the other players coming back that are important. Sabelli, you've got Hefty on the bench.
Yeah.
So
you've got to have him have that rotation. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see those guys in our last match. We got, I think, our first look at Puskás, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the last match day against SPAL. And I think there's that hope that you see that connection. A lot of these players are fairly new in how Blessin wants to play. I mean, David, do you have any surprise kind of teams so far looking at the Serie B table, or players that you think are worth signaling out that kind of didn't expect to be doing as well as they are today?
If I would need to have a look at the table and just sort of glance up and down it, but in terms of, we'll take a look at Cagliari because they're coming up. They've got Mancosu there now. He's their leading goal scorer. It's only 2 goals. Like Korda's got 2 goals. It's early in the season, but they managed to hold on to a couple of key midfielders. They've still got Nandes. Rog is there, who was a great player at Napoli, just couldn't get the opportunity with Hamzik and Zielinski in front of him.
Yeah.
And, they're players to watch out for. They managed to hold on to Pavoletti, a former Genoa player there. Maybe, he's getting on, but, they've got depth as well. They are the other club, obviously, that's come down besides Venezia. And they also have the plan, but, some shocking losses. They lost to Venezia last weekend. I think that was the saving grace for Ivan Javocic, the Venezia coach. But because, Venezia looked, you think Genoa's got it bad. Genoa fans, come on, look at Venezia fans at the moment. Absolutely. So,
or Cagliari, even Cagliari too, right?
Cagliari as well. They're in 9th. Genoa is the best of the relegated sides from Serie A last season. But anything can happen with look at Bari. They got promoted from Girone C in Lega Pro, and they are joint leaders. They belted Brescia. They were winning 6-0 against Brescia, and Brescia got 2 back at the end. But, that was a 6-pointer, technically, because Brescia had 15, Bari had 12. Now they've got 15 apiece. Look at Regina with Super Pippo. I mean, that is a squad that has been sort of, it's like Zio Mario in his workshop, a bit of timber there and you were using some old nails. So look what you can do if you have the right mentality. And I think Blessin is definitely a coach with that old school hard knocks mentality, especially when he came in and he got 6 0-0 draws or 55 0-0 draws, whatever it was. at the time, and he had a plan. Well, he probably knew he was sinking on this ship, but he came in with a long-term goal, and I think he's got the squad to do it. But glancing up and down this Classifica, Frosinone, they're okay under Fabio Grosso. They're doing okay.
Yep.
Brescia, I expect them to be up there. So Ternana is a surprise because Lucarelli, he's not exactly the most offensive coach, and as usual, they're conceding a lot of goals, but scoring goals. And it's like an Australian rules football team. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that, but it's a sport with a lot of goals in each game, and you kind of win 17 goals to 15. That is what Ternana represents to me. But it's great to see them back because they were only just back up to the Serie B last season. And along with Bari this season, you can see these Serie C teams. It doesn't take much of an investment to compete from the third to second division. Still, you have to invest. But, I think Genoa had the edge over these other clubs with Parma, with Cagliari. So Cosenza is an absolute miracle.
Mystery. Yeah. It's a mystery as well, yeah. Like from almost like being relegated. I'm not saying that they were going to be bankrupt like Regina, because they were not necessarily at that level, but almost, from what I've heard, anyways. But to what the response, the other Rosso Blu of the championship right now, anyways. But no, I'm super happy because there's like a good gemellaggio that we have going on with the Cosenza fans. And I'm super happy for them, and the surprise, absolutely super surprised on the results.
You've got them away after Cagliari, so prepare for battle.
I know, and I was looking actually at Bari, which is the one that I'm, I guess at this point, if before I was thinking about the Parma match was going to be a tough one, the Cagliari, which is the one coming up as well, or the Palermo, that even though it's not like at the level of it, was still like going to be, or the Benevento, they're all like a type of tough ones. But now the Bari one, which is going to be on Boxing Day, that might be hopefully our late Christmas gift. I don't know. We'll see.
That's away, isn't it, as well? So,
yeah,
they're happy with their newly redone stadium, and they're pumped. We'll see if they're still up there in the top 4 come Christmas time. I think Genoa will be, but
that's a good point. Like, what's going to happen when, like, in December, is it going to be the same? What's going to happen in February? Also, all depends on the length of the bench. So what I'm trying to get at that is, like, I believe that the bench at Genoa is quite lengthy with important teams. Like, look at the fact also, just like from last match against Modena, against SPAL, where we had Sabelli to replace Payet. And I think for most of the Serie B teams, he would be in the starting 11 all the time. So when we saw him in the starting 11, obviously because of the injury and whatnot, but it was like great to have him there, and that means also all the other players that you mentioned too. When they come in, they would be all starting 11 for, I would say, all the Serie B teams out there, if not some of them even in Serie A.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the important thing for me for Genoa, because I try and, without going into too much depth on each team, but I try and have a good look at the lists as a commentator. And, you look at clubs like Cagliari and Genoa, they still have the depth. You've got Dragusin as well, Galdames, Jagiello that can come off the bench and do a job. And I think, you've got also players that come off the bench and can score. So that's the big difference. That is something that a lot of teams were lacking in the playoffs last season. And that's why Monza got through, because they had a guy off the bench that could come and score goals, whether it was Churia, whether it was Gudkia, they had someone. And that is the big difference. And now he's scoring goals in Serie A. Yeah. Not for fun, but he's got one. So that's the big key difference between Genoa and some of these other sides. Cagliari, for Friday's match, it's going to be an arm wrestle. I think they're going to be a little bit hurt in terms of personal pride. And I was over in Cagliari recently commentating the Euros of beach soccer, and I met a few fans there, and they're expecting to go straight back up. It's basically a one-team region, so they're expecting to go back up. They brought in Lapadula, He's only got one goal, but we all know what he's capable of. Mancosu's there. Falco is another sort of crafty forward, similar to an Adamu. He's very, very good set piece taker. Viola is there, who for me was one of Benevento's best players, and until he fell out and then left for Bologna. You've even got players like Deola, who are just 90 minutes running machines. They do the give and go. They're not that creative, but they're gonna try and create problems. Try and hit someone like a Frandrup and make sure he's injured for 5 minutes. One of those players that come in and with a bit of grit, and they're sent out there to stab someone in the ankle with a football tag. Then you've got Zappa as well, who for me, I'm surprised someone in Serie A didn't pick him up, but maybe he's one of those fringe players between the divisions. So it's going to be tough, but definitely the psychological advantage with the Grifone at home and higher up on the table. I guess it's kind of not exactly a 6-pointer, considering a 4-point difference between the two clubs, but Genoa coming off 2 wins, Cagliari going the other way with 2 sconfitte, and now, they don't want to make it 3 in a row. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're sent out to park the bus. Liverani doesn't usually do that, but we'll see.
I know there's a lot of Genoa kind of connections with Liverani and with others with this match, and it's good that you mentioned that too, because I think it's kind of a tricky one going against Cagliari now. They're in a low run of form, but sometimes that works the opposite way, especially with a club that's expecting to compete. They're going to be looking up at this match, and I do think your point on the 6-pointer is kind of right too, because maybe Cagliari are where they are right now, but if you fast forward a few months, I think we're all expecting them to be in that top quadrant of the table, and truthfully, they're not that far off from us right now. So getting the most we can out of maybe a slightly dinged up, at least maybe psychologically, Cagliari squad, I think we got to do as much as we can with that.
It's still early, obviously. We're still at match day 7, so it's still there's still a lot to play, and that's what everybody, all the guests that we keep having from Serie B and whatnot, they're all saying, just get as many points as possible, because this is a very, very, very long tournament and so on. And it as we talked about the 5 points differential between the top and the 10th spot, that means it takes 2 seconds just to drop, as well as it's easy to get up, mind you, obviously on the other side. Mm-hmm. Just to mention a couple of other also connections that you guys were talking about between Cagliari and Genoa. So obviously Liverani that we talked about, but there's also Capozzucca, which is their sports director, which is a long living sports director under Preziosi. And not to mention Super Goldrick. Hopefully he's not going to do super amazing, because I still appreciate his human nature that he had, and he showed even all the way to the last match before we had to part ways. So I'm talking about Goldaniga, but I will still and always respect that man for how he's shown his respect towards the Gradinata Nord, which was spectacular.
And he was a warrior for so many years too. I mean, in those years where we were clinging just to stay in Serie A, he was always part of that mix.
Well, I mean, it was lose-lose for him, leaving Genoa to go to Cagliari, and now he went down either way. So
right,
that's right. That's a good point.
He's still young enough to make another go of a Serie A stint in his career.
I think so too.
29. Yeah.
So I guess before we wrap the episode, I wanted to just do a roundtable, even though we kind of more or less talked about it a little bit, but let's just see out bluntly your predictions and goal scoring, if there are any that you think that are going to be scoring. So I don't know, whoever wants to start is fine.
I can start. I think I do think it's going to be a tight match for sure. I give the edge to Genoa in this one, just talking about some of the options that were there. It still blows my mind that we brought Puskas off at the 71st minute or whatever it was against SPAL, and just had that rotation come in as some of our players didn't even play, that I think would be, for sure starting in some other teams, starting 11. So I would give the edge to Genoa. I think it'll end 2-1. I don't think it's going to be a goal fest. I actually think David's prediction is kind of interesting about the physical. That's one way we can get hurt. So That's my bet, 2-1 to Genoa, but we'll see.
And which goal scorers are you going to put attached to that?
I think we might see the first from Aramu. I think we could see that on the list. I know he's been a little bit more of like the connector in the last few games, but I could see him kind of nabbing one. And I do think Coda again will get on the score sheet. I know maybe somewhat fortunate with the goal that he kind of got the deflection from in the SPAL match, but I think we're going to start to see more of that partnership work out for us up front. So,
David.
In games like this, it's usually a coaching decision to bring in a player that has a good record, in particular against this particular opposition. I don't know which player that is. I'm assuming if there is one, it would be Mancosu, because he seems to have scored against every club in Serie A about 3 years ago when he scored like 14 goals. Mm-hmm. But he's a set piece taker. He probably will step up and take a penalty if there's one awarded. I can see Cagliari playing on the counter. I think Genoa are going to come out just like they did against SPAL, where they were dominating and SPAL were on the back foot for especially for a lot of the first half. Mm-hmm. And I think Genoa can try and wear them down. I think they can hem them back in their own half. We'll see if that's what Blessin wants to do, because, we all know how Italian coaches think, let's play it safe for the first half hour if we can. And he knows Cagliari is a big team in this division, and it's going to be interesting to see, even if he wants to start someone like Lapadula or not. I don't know his record against Genoa, and I know there's a history there also. Right. With being an ex, and sometimes you don't want that player on the park because they always seem to score against you. So it will be interesting to see if he deploys Lapadula, because that factor that he can strike against the old employer. I think he might start with Pavoletti, because he's also an ex-Genoa player. I guess there's a few between the clubs. And I think he's going to try and just get aerial balls into him. He's still athletic enough from what I can see. I haven't seen much of him in Serie B this season, but towards the back end of last year's Serie A season, he was still quite good, quite athletic, and he was started a lot, even in the top division. If there's a goal from long range, it's going to come from Pereiro, that's for sure, because he's one of those guys that can hit them, and he's quite a good player. I can't really see any other way besides Pavoletti. At ground level, I think Genoa will have it wrapped up. I think they're going to have to go aerial, and I think even like an Altare from a set piece, a corner or something like that, maybe. But I'm going to go with a Genoa 3 wins in a row. I'm not just saying that because of the audience, but I genuinely think they're on the front foot and they've got a plan and they've got their formation set. And I think Blessin has a stronger mentality in the battle of the coaches here. And I think someone like, if Portanova starts, I think he's a guy that might be left to have a little bit of space. He's not great with goal scoring, but, I think he's got a goal this season already. Besides that, the obvious choice is Coda. So I'm going to go with 2-0. Coda and Portanova.
Coda and Portanova. That sounds quite possible, actually, highly possible. I like that. On my side, I'm actually battled between the two. I still agree that it's going to be a Genoa win. It's going to be for a narrow margin. Yep. Whether it's going to be a 1-0 or a 2-1, I don't know. I think that except the match against Parma, Genoa has shown quality at the back. So therefore, like the fact of not having many goals, I think that Parma was like a little bit of a fluke. It's not what we're going to be seeing from Genoa on the defense side. Yeah. From the attack side, we've seen a little bit of changes, like from the original 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2 that we have been seeing. The last match showed a little bit of a return back to the old model that Blessin was using. So we saw a 4-2-3-1, yep, which has seen Coda a little bit more of the star at the front. And I think that with the new players that are coming along with the minutes on their legs and whatnot, I think that it's going to be a little bit more on that model. Cagliari themselves have been played I think it was a 4-3-2-1 or 4-2-3-1 against Venezia, and they lost. While they usually play the 4-3-3, and I think they're going to return to the 4-3-3 because that's the model that they play better. So I don't know. It's going to be tough to see with what Blessing's going to dictate from their the asset of his team, and or if he's going to be again showing Ekuban. We don't know what's his medical status and whatnot.
Yeah,
but let's say if it was going to be a 1-0, which is what I think more what's going to look like. It could be anyone, because I'm seeing it remembers me a little bit of the olden days with Gasperini, where we wouldn't have a specific striker except like the days of Borriello, but that would be a little bit different, or Milito himself. But with a team that is, as David said earlier, is able to strike no matter from what player. So it doesn't really matter that it's going to be Cota. I don't think Cota is going to win again for the third time in a row the Capocannoniere for Serie B, just because of the amount of quality and talent that is up there as well, as we just mentioned before. So actually, I think that it's going to be I'm agreeing with Matt, and I think it would be nice to see Aramo scoring the 1-0.
It would be an interesting one. Maybe we get like a good free kick goal from him or something like that.
That's what I was thinking.
A nice like kind of curler or something like that. So, or
from a corner.
There you
go. He's got that dangerous left foot. The whip on that left foot from Aramo is sensational. I mean, some of the goals he scored for Venezia last season, impeccable player. I love watching him.
We're fortunate to have him, for sure.
So I guess we're at a wrap. I'm going to hands down, hats off, and just say, David, thank you very much for us being blessed to have you with us on our podcast. Like, it's tremendous. Your not only the fact of shout out to our podcast a few times, and also the fact of being a guest in this short snippet talking about the matches. And it was a blast having you with us.
It's always great talking to true fans. So I'm glad I'm talking about true fans of Calcio here, that embrace their club and they stick with them through thick and thin. And a lot of fans out there won't know what it's like to go down and back again, and constantly do that as well. And you have to sit there and think, is this really worth it? Should I jump ship and go to one of the other bigger clubs? And you guys don't. And I respect that. And thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. È stato un piacere.
And don't remember, for anybody, Lega Podcast, you can find it anywhere. Wonderful pod, lots of great stuff in there. You want to go into Serie C, Serie B, the rest of Serie A, check it out.
We'll try and have more Genoa on there. And when I do, it'll be Matt and Fabrizio delivering the goods. So can't wait for that.
That's fantastic. So thank you, everyone, for listening to us once again. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And the podcast is obviously on all major broadcasters that are out there. So looking forward to talk to you next week. And Forza Genoa.
Forza Genoa.
Forza Genoa.
You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genuani Si Resta. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.